Hey everybody, Eric Renier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, this is our first episode in 2 weeks, and
That's right.
I really missed you, and I'm just happy to see your face again.
Me too, Eric. It's good to see you again. And we thought that, usually late July and early August are relatively slow and quiet. Ooh, okay, the last few days have been extremely busy in polls. And we're talking federal, and of course, provincial. We have polls, I think, from 3 provinces and many ones from Quebec. So lots to get to. Federally, I think we had like 6 new polls in the last 7 to 10 days, including a léger that I think we should talk about. Yeah, there's plenty. Of course, there's like the negotiations with the tariffs. There's the Churchill Falls thing with Quebec and Terre-Neuve-Labrador. And so there's tons of topic to talk about and numbers to deconstruct. We don't have a quiz today. I don't have a quiz. It'll come back probably next week or this month. But today we'll focus on the numbers. Eric, where would you like to start today? I'm listening.
Yeah, we've got lots to talk about. As you said, we thought, what, if we take a week off, what's going to happen?
Nope.
But unfortunately, we have to take it next week off as well. So I'm sorry for our audience. When the parents come visit, you gotta give them your full attention. So that's going to be happening next week. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. And you know what? In 2 weeks, boy, that's going to be the day the Quebec election is called.
That's what we expect. Madame Fréchette, the Quebec premier, we expect her to call the election somewhere between the 26th and the 28th, and I think the Thursday is the 27th. Yep. So yeah, and I can tell you that there will be many more polls in Quebec to set the stage. We had 3 polls in the past week in Quebec. They all, we're going to get there eventually. I just want to say they all pretty much agree. They're very close to each other, but they do tell different stories. And I think that's one interesting aspect of it. But let's start. Let's start fairly, as we usually do. We have by-elections coming, and we have many polls, Eric.
Yes. Okay, so the last time we chatted, we were talking about the Liberals and the lead that they had over the Conservatives. Yeah. There was some disparity. Some polls were suggesting the lead was big. Some were suggesting it wasn't that big. And 2 weeks later, I think we have our answer about just how big the Liberal lead. The polls over the last week and a half or so that have been published, I would say they're pretty good for the Liberals, but they're even worse for the Conservatives. I think that is really kind of the headline here, is that we've had a number of polls published over the last couple of weeks that have had the Conservatives below the 30% threshold. Now, we'll get into some of those polls and what to make of that, but that is a psychological threshold that I think, we've mentioned it before, becomes a big problem for Pierre Poilievre if those kinds of numbers hold for long term.
That's the thing too, huh? Like we look at the Liberals, the average is around their score in the 25 election. Obviously we should preface, we had polls from Léger, Nanos, Liaison Research Co. back in BC, Ecos, and Spark. The two polling firms of late that had shown closer race, Abacus Data and English Street, have not released new numbers still. So perhaps they will have a closer race and we enter that into the average. But we're talking about 17-point lead, 19-point lead, 20-point lead for the Liberals. And if I can just start with Nanos here. So we talked a lot about Nanos, of course, because they do a weekly thing. Mm-hmm. But last week it was a 19-point lead for the Liberals over the Conservatives. And so I looked at the tracker. Eric, the last time there was a 19-point gap between the two parties, would you have a guess when that was? Just a guess.
19, I don't know. That's got to be Trudeau time.
It was December 6th, 2024. So 10 days before Chrystia Freeland basically ended Trudeau's prime ministership. And it was a 19-point lead for the Conservatives. In the weeks that followed, that lead grew to over 20 points, then fell back down. But it was, so if you're wondering what do the numbers say right now, think of the end of Justin Trudeau and how the Liberals were considered, how they were perceived back then. We all thought, they're done. Trudeau is done. There's no coming back from that. And so maybe we have to change our priors, because I didn't feel that way about Poilievre and the Conservatives, but Is this just summer polling, Eric?
Yeah.
Because when you see that double-digit lead, a consistent basis from several pollsters, and you see these single poll projection at over 200 seats, I mean, okay, Research Co is a bit of an extreme case, 20-point lead. That on my model, it was 261 seats for the Liberals. It's not happening. That's not happening. You throw it in the average, but it's a sea of red out there, and you have to wonder. If you think that the Conservatives with Poilievre can come back from this, think about 24. Could Trudeau come back from this? These numbers are similar.
Yeah, the Liberal numbers, as you mentioned, like they're a little bit. So for a while we were talking about how the Liberals were starting to get into the low 40s. So maybe they had shaved off a little bit of their support. But these are better numbers. You got 46 Léger and Nanos, you got 44 in Liaison, you got 47 in Research, and 45 in Ecos, 48 in Spark. So you got some high numbers there. And that's kind of where we were, let's say, at the beginning of the summer or at the end of the spring. Yeah. But it's really the Conservatives, because you have 4 polls that have them under 30%. So Ecos had them at 27, Spark had them at 29, Research had them at 27. Now, those 3 polls, we haven't heard from a lot. Yeah, they publish infrequently. We've seen obviously some big variations, especially like with the Ecos numbers sometimes. Like Ecos has the NDP at 17, which is way higher than what everybody else has the NDP. Yeah. So, you could kind of say, well, maybe those polls have had them in sub 30 for months, and we just, you don't know it. So it's not a new thing, and they were always much lower than everybody else. It's just that when you also have this happening at the same time that Nanos has them under 30 for a couple of weeks, when Liaison has them at 31, because they not too long ago had them going up, it starts to look like something else, and a lot of trouble for the Conservatives. Now, what you said about summer polling, that is something that I take into consideration too, right?
Yeah, me too.
We have seen sometimes the polls can get a little bit wonky in the summer. In part because response rates kind of change, and who might be around to take part in the polls might be a bit different or interested. But nevertheless, these are still really bad numbers. The Conservatives weren't sub 30 last summer.
No, they were not. No.
These things, this is not a good set of numbers for the Conservatives by any stretch. And we will get some more by-elections coming now in just over 2.5 weeks. That could put some real numbers, some real votes that kind of emphasize, if the Conservatives have a bad night, just how rough a shape they're in right now.
So I know we talked about Chicoutimi-Lefebvre before our little break here. We'll talk about it again, but I received messages, and I've seen on social media a lot of people referring to Chicoutimi-Lefebvre as the potential Trudeau-Saint Paul for Trudeau. Like, could it be like...
For Poilievre, right.
For Poilievre. Yeah. For what was Trudeau in Toronto-Saint Paul. Like, it was like a shot through the heart, a blue seat in Toronto where the Liberals had won easily. Now, of course, the Conservatives did not win Chicoutimi-Lefebvre easily, but they have won it many times over the past 2 decades. And should they lose this, does it just throw a dagger right there? I mean, I think it would be overstating it, but it could be one of the first dominoes, because the other by-election, Monsieur Larry Brock from Brantford,
Brant South,
in Six Nations, yes. So this riding was won by double digits in the Conservatives. It was 52% for Mr. Brock, 41% for the Liberal challenger. So it's not a safe seat for the Conservatives, but it's definitely a good seat for the Conservatives. And right now, if you look at the numbers that we've had over the past 6 months, not just 6 weeks, but over the past, all the numbers basically in 2026, the Liberals could win this. And if they do win this, suddenly, you lose, Conservatives lose Chicoutimi-Lefebvre, they lose Brantford. Like, at some point, these losses pile on. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but this conversation will have to happen if the numbers flip. And I wonder how much the Liberals will give it a try in Brantford. It's a tough seat to win for the Liberals. They haven't won that in 20 years. How do you see it, Eric?
Yeah, when you said like which one would be the shot through the heart for the Poilievre's leadership, Chicoutimi-Lefebvre doesn't strike me as that one, in part because it's a Quebec seat. Because the members in Quebec, or the party apparatus, when they think about Quebec, they always think about Quebec as, or at least you often hear this, that they're never going to do all that well in it, that all of their efforts to try to win it ends up just costing them seats elsewhere because they have to water down some of their positions. So I would imagine that if they lose Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord, you could have a lot of people kind of making excuses for it and not saying it's that big of a deal. Yeah. I do think, though, the odds of it happening have increased. Have you seen in Quebec? I mean, you can probably pull it up on your site pretty quickly, but in Quebec, we've had poll after poll after poll now that have had the Conservatives under 20% in Quebec, including the new Synopsis Recherche poll that came out, which was Quebec only, big sample. So there's been a lot of polls showing that they've dropped quite a bit in Quebec. So it starts to become a little bit tougher to imagine that they can hold on to Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord when they won it by 3 points. And they seem to have dropped many more points than 3 in Quebec. But Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations, which is the name of it now, they're dropping Six Nations, which was at the request of the Six Nations in Brantford, Brant South. That one could be real trouble because it is a rural-ish seat. Sure, there's Brantford, there's urban areas in it, but it's a southwest Ontario kind of seat that has stuck with the Conservatives. That is kind of the bedrock kind of seat that they should be expected to win in Ontario. And we've seen pretty good numbers for the Liberals in Ontario, pretty bad numbers for the Conservatives. But in the last election, we saw a lot of seats like this that had big gains for the Liberals. And when you look at the kind of demographics of the people who support the Liberals, a bit more boomerish, a bit whiter, a bit more established, you saw a lot of seats in Eastern Ontario and parts of Southwestern Ontario where the Liberal vote just jumped way up in places that we never would have expected. Like they almost won Lanark. They almost won, they were close in like Leeds, Grenville, and places like that.
Yeah.
So winning here is not out of the question if they can find a good candidate. And if that happens, the Ontario caucus, I can imagine, might be a little bit less secure than the Alberta-Saskatchewan caucus when it comes to their seats, and that could cause problems.
I repeat something that I've said to you many times. Sometimes we overreact to by-elections, but they do matter. They do. Sometimes, a little bit, right? We like numbers and we like elections. But the thing is, we sometimes we overreact to by-elections because many of them don't matter that much in the big scheme of things. I mean, the Conservatives will win the Yorkton seat in Saskatchewan. The margins could be interesting, but this one will not matter that much except for the local people. But if the Conservatives start losing Ontario seats that they won last year by double digits, you can't tell me that it would be very comfortable for the MPs to not look at the leadership and say, there's no way we're winning with this guy. We can't just wait for Carney to screw up or for the economy to go down or for Trump to do something crazy again, and that makes Canada look bad. So, and again, this is the Brantford Brant South. When you look at the results, basically the NDP vote completely collapsed. And we assume most of it, not all of it, but most of it went to the Liberals. Now there's no more NDP vote to take for the Liberals. It was 3.7% in the election. So this is marginal, right? But we have seen some movement. Clearly, there has been some movement from moderate Conservatives towards the Liberals. And if moderate Conservatives, maybe 5 points in Brantford, go to the Liberals, that's it. You have a win there. And so, I don't know. This is a very strange one. If you made a list of potentially very interesting by-elections, this one could be even more interesting than Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord, I think. So
out of the slate we got, this one stands out to me. Chicoutimi is going to stand out. Obviously, the ones in Rosemont and Laurier-Sainte-Marie are going to be
for different reasons,
but for very different reasons. We also had another by-election that's going to be added to the calendar in Scarborough North. Sean Chen, who's a Liberal MP, he had a car accident late last year, and apparently he's having health issues related to the car accident, make it difficult for him to travel to Ottawa. So he's going to resign, I believe, this weekend. So that starts the clock ticking on that riding. Now, that one was a 30-point win for the Liberals. Scarborough is... I'm not really sure why. No one's really been able to explain this to me. And I think we've tried, because I think we got it as a question in the mailbag one. So Scarborough is one of the safest Liberal areas in the country. It was they won seats in 2011 in Scarborough. For whatever reason, they put up 60-plus numbers there. And so there's no real doubt that the Liberals would hold on to Scarborough North. But, more tests for that. And I'm sure there's lots of people within the Conservative Party who would like to just kind of dismiss some of these poll numbers. But by-election results, when they corroborate the poll numbers, they become even harder to.
Oh, yeah.
It becomes harder to dismiss the polls, and it becomes harder to dismiss the by-election results. So that's going to be a big problem for them, I think. This set of numbers is just. We talked about it before, but whenever you see a 33 or 34 or lower, and most of these polls were lower, that is what Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer did. So it does start to raise the question of, well, if we're sticking with him, what's he bringing to the table? Because two kind of leaders who were not seen as particularly charismatic and appealing did better. So, there's always that case, well, if not him, who else? And we saw that poll from Nanos showing no one's
18%.
really catching fire, as if those polls I don't really like very much, but at some point, I guess you might as well just try something different. And Nanos said the best PM, he's still under 20. He's at 18% this week.
54 Carney and 18 Poilievre. This is not close. So I don't care what method you use. This is not close. And by the way, ResearchGo is also one of the firms that has preferred prime minister numbers. It was 45-22 in favor of Carney. So different numbers, but still a huge gap.
Primarily lower just for Carney rather than higher than for,
That's right. Three little things I want to add before we move off here. You mentioned the federal conservatives numbers in Quebec. Just so context, I have the numbers here. So ResearchGo, 15 for the Conservatives. Léger, 19. Liaison Stratégies, 18. Ecos had 22. Abacus had 20. And Angus Reid, which, it's Angus Reid, 18%. The Conservatives had 24% in the election. And now there's an overwhelming consensus from across the board that they may have lost on average 5 to 7 points in a province. You don't keep Chicoutimi-Lafleur in that scenario unless the local candidate can do miracles. The other thing. Well, now I forget. About Scarborough North. You just said, well, we don't really know why it's one of the safest Liberals. And to add a little spice to this, provincially, that went to the PCs by a fair margin. Right? So this is one of those PC federal Liberal seat that doesn't seem to move a lot. I mean, eventually the PCs will lose this, but it's been reliably PC. It won by big margins in 18 and 22 and 25 in the provincial elections. So, there's no indication that shows that Scarborough North could flip colors. There's plenty of indication that Brant South could. This could be the next round of by-elections that I expect to happen somewhere between the somewhere between the Alberta referendum and Christmas. That could be a fun night for us, at least, and our members. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We got a bunch of live streams coming up. Yeah. We're hoping, depending again on scheduling, that we can do a live stream on August 31st for those 3 by-elections, so we can take a look at what's happening in Chicoutimi-Lafleur. And so before I move on, any thoughts on the NDP's number? You had 17 in Ecos, but you also had 8 in Léger and 10 in Research. Abacus also had them pretty low. 13 in the Nanos and Liaison. I'm not really seeing. Some of them might have got excited by the Ecos number, but I'm not really seeing much other signs of anything really changing for the NDP.
Well, I mean, we don't see the 5s and the 6s anymore. Right. So
the fact that Léger put them up to 8 was a big deal.
Exactly. Léger had the NDP very low since the election. Now the average is around 10%. I mean, we don't know how solid this is. Of course, we know the NDP number can go down in an election where the Conservatives are close. But the fact that the Conservatives are not polling well could maybe convince some swing voters to say, oh, you know what, the Liberals, they're safely ahead. I can support the NDP, which I prefer, generally, except during election time. 13 from Nanos, 10 from ResearchGo, as you said, 8 from Léger, 13 from Liaison. You said the ECO 17, it's the highest right now, and Abacus 2 weeks ago had 9. So low double digits for the NDP. The rebuilding is still very much in its first phases for Avi Lewis. We'll see how it goes in the fall. Yeah,
I'm going to look at their score in Beach East York, especially on August 31st.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How about Quebec? We got 3 new polls. I kind of love the current situation right now in Quebec. From a polling perspective, we have 3 firms now. One's obviously Pallas Data, which is commissioned by you. We have Léger now reporting for Québécois, of course.
Yep.
And now Synopsis Recherche, which is for La Presse. And everybody's kind of polling at the same time, which is terrific because when everybody's in the field at around the same time, you can really compare trends from one poll to the next.
Right.
Across regions. That's really good. And something I also noted today when I was in the writ that I wrote today, these 3 polls are all commissioned by various media outlets.
Yes.
You don't see that very much anymore. I think there's a good shot that most of the polls we'll see in the Quebec election campaign will be media-sponsored polls. They won't just be polls put out by pollsters, which is what we increasingly see. So I think that it shows a bit of a different... almost a different kind of media/polling climate in Quebec than in the rest of the country, which I think is a good thing. But anyway, I just realized that all 3 polls were media commissioned, whereas all the polls that we discussed in the federal section, the only one that was commissioned, I think, was the Léger poll for Post Media. So that just shows how things are a bit different. Anyway, why don't you take us away? I'm sure you've been talking about these polls for days, so you probably know the numbers off by heart.
But hang on here. It's because the election is approaching. I mean, at the federal election, Nanos is linked with CTV.
Yes, that's true.
There's more. But yeah, the thing is, okay, so for the rest of the country, Quebec voters care far more about their provincial election than the federal election. I'm not saying they don't care about the federal election, but you will not see a 43% turnout like we saw in Ontario last year. That's not happening in Quebec. And I can tell you that my website, en français, QC125, and the fact that right now I am in the Radio-Canada building, and I've been doing tons of media for several outlets, except Québécois, because they have Monsieur Léger, so they're fine. They don't need me. The amount of interest is incredible. And will there be more sponsor polls than these 3? I know of a 4th one that will be sponsored. I can't tell you right now. We will know very soon enough when we come back in late August. But that'll be it. Like the other posters will not be commissioned unless by a private party. That's not media. So anyway, Léger has 30% for the PQ. Palace has 31%. Ooh, and Synopsis has 30% for the PQ. We call this a consensus, my friend. So low 30s for the Parti Québécois, which is mostly unchanged from what we saw just before the summer break in June. The Liberals. Now, there is a bit of a spread, but it's minor. 24 from Léger, 27 from Palace, and 26 from Synopsis. There is a difference that is a bit greater among Francophone voters. I'll get to that in a second. The CAQ, 20% from Léger, 20% from Synopsis, 19% from Palace. Again, there's a consensus, and the Conservatives, 13, 14, 15. So it's been extremely consensual, those 3 polls. But we have to talk about the Francophone vote because, of course, it matters a whole lot too in the seat count. It's also the biggest difference between these 3 polls. Léger has the Quebec Liberals at 13% among Francophones.
Yikes.
That's really, really bad. Like, really bad. The Liberals would do they would do just a bit better than in 2022, which was their worst ever since Confederation. Synopsis had 16%. Okay. And Palace has 19%. So there's a 6-point spread for the Liberals in 3 polls. And you can say it's a subsample, although it's a big subsample. It's the Francophone vote. It's 80% of the population. But this will matter a whole lot where the needle goes. Because if Palace is correct, suddenly the Liberals could win in the mid-40s amount of seat. And then perhaps a path to a majority is not possible for the PQ. If Léger is correct, then the CAQ has a real shot of surprising a lot of people and not winning a handful of seats, but perhaps 18, 20, 22 seats. And everything is up in the air if that happens. So that would be my first kind of observation. Of course, there's sovereignty numbers that I will like to get to. But Eric, you looked at these polls. You follow the numbers. What is your big takeaway from these trio of Quebec polls?
Well, the first is that the summer really hasn't moved things at all. I mean, if you looked at the average movement in these polls between now and June when they were all last in the field, the biggest one is a 1-point drop for the CAQ on average and a 1-point gain for the Conservatives. That's it.
That's it.
So there hasn't been much change over the summer, which is interesting because for Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, these numbers are good enough to win, but they're also pretty uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Because it wouldn't take much to suddenly lose or at least really drop in the seat count. Like you have like a 3-point swing, let's say, among Francophones between the PQ and the CEQ, and suddenly the PQ is not, it's going to struggle to win over 50 seats, right? Like it becomes pretty uncomfortable. They're not, if they were at 34, they could be, they'd be pretty happy about that. So they haven't really been able to move the dial, but they're still leading. So that's like the good news. And then for the CEQ, Christine Fréchette was showing some signs of potential growth, that she does seem to have improved the CEQ standing quite a bit, and the fact that they're no longer in wipeout territory, they're just in catastrophe territory. But
exactly.
But she needed to keep building, and she hasn't. So that is, I think, the kind of the headline there for the CEQ, that they've kind of plateaued, and this is not the best place to plateau, because they're on, again, that kind of threshold between winning a handful of seats thanks to local candidates and potentially winning 20 or something like that. So I think that's kind of the takeaway for people like outside of Quebec looking at this. PQ is still the overwhelming favorite to win the most seats, despite the relatively close margin between the PQ and the Liberals. But it is such a toss-up.
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, in your projections, I'm hoping to have some projections for the campaign. We're going to have so many too close to call kind of ridings that you could have an outcome that is going to be a bit of a surprise, in the sense that you can't really predict it. Not that there's going to be a shock, like if projections are that the PQ is plus or minus 20 seats, there's not a lot of surprise, but it's just that the predictability of it is going to be tough unless things shift.
So, okay, the CEQ, they think they can win 30. Now, that's a lot. But the thing is, if you play around with the model and you imagine the CEQ not at 20%, like the consensus that we saw in last week's polls, if they are at 23%, so like one margin of error, if you will, roughly, right, away from winning 30 seats, it's possible. I've tested it, and they would be correct. In some suburbs of Montreal, especially the South Shore to the east, and regions like the Mauricie, Centre du Québec, even in the townships, if they just go up a little bit, then the floods get open, and suddenly the PQ is taking a big dive from this. But I was asked during an interview last week an analogy for the Parti québécois, because my update from last night, if you go on QC125 or 338 Canada Quebec, you can see the update. The PQ wins the most seats in 99% of simulations. So you go like, okay, 99% of simulations, we're done here. But it's such a knife's edge, as I said. 2-3 points completely flipped it. And I can't remember another election like that. I mean, I remember the OLP at some point had a huge confidence interval because of, they're competitive where the PCs are in Ontario in many places. And in the end, the PCs won all the toss-ups virtually. But I can't remember a scenario like that. And if we have a National Assembly that is completely broken down, so imagine, and I'm not putting the parties in ranks here, but there is a scenario that's plausible, like the winner gets 45 seats, and the runner-up gets 40, and the third place gets 30. And you have two small parties, Québec Solidaire and the Conservatives. Well, the Conservative small party, they could reach that threshold of 12 seats for recognized party status. If you have this and they all dislike each other and there's no possible collaboration, we're going to have a Quebec election in the spring. Right. There's no way that the budget passes. Nobody will have confidence in the government. So this is right now a scenario. But just to go, and I'm sorry, I'm going every which way. But for the Parti québécois, the analogy was basically is this. There's a hockey analogy. So I'm missing a Habs game because I have a rendezvous. But I got home. It's the start of the third period. I turn the TV on and I see, the Habs are leading 4-3. I'm happy. 1 period left. They're leading 4-3. That's pretty good. I sit down. And while I do that, I take my phone to check what I missed. And I realize they were leading 4-0. And now it's 4-3. Suddenly, I don't feel very comfortable with that 1-goal lead. That's the Parti québécois. They're still in the lead. They're still the favorite. But the movement over the last 8 months has not been favorable to them. And you wonder if they can hold this for a whole campaign.
One of the other issues, most of their kind of movement tends to be between the PQ and the CEQ, right? Yes. There has been some relationship between the Liberal and the CEQ vote. But if you look at the demographic breakdowns, the CQ has rock bottom numbers among younger voters. They're often in fifth place.
Yep.
But they do really well among older voters. They're sometimes tied with the PQ. They're usually in the the mid to high 20s.
Yeah.
So you kind of expect that the CQ is probably going to beat their polls, right? And if they beat their polls by a little bit, because older voters vote in bigger numbers, so their voters are more likely to go out. Suddenly their 19 and 20s become 21s, 22s, and once again, it eats into that PQ vote. And, you talk about that knife's edge. Like on your site, you have the what are they called? The Gaussian curves or whatever?
Yeah, yeah.
That show...
Long tail.
There's a long tail for the PQ and for the CQ, but that tail is primarily in minority territory, not in majority territory. So it's almost like if everything goes well for the PQ, they win a majority. If just a few things go wrong, they drop to minority. And if the campaign takes on a life of its own, then who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows?
Things could change pretty significantly. The sovereignty numbers, though, are pretty... They're pretty bad They're
really bad. Yeah, considering PQ support has held, and even in the Palace data poll, I mean, it went up a little bit for this, the support for the PQ compared to the previous ballot poll. It went from 29 to 31. Now that's within the margin of error, but it's still positive movement in the poll. In the same poll, sovereignty lost 4 points. It went down to 29. It was 33. Went down to 29. Again, maybe that's a bit beyond the margin of error, but the other polls, Léger and Synopsis, before distribution of undecided, would you vote for sovereignty if a referendum was held today? 28% yes from Léger, 28% from Synopsis, 29% for Palace. It used to be that a number that starts with a 2 in favor of sovereignty was the exception. The average was around 34, and so you'd get the odd 29 sometimes. And you can go on the site to scroll the list. You get the odd 29. But now we have 3 straight polls from recognized pollsters in Quebec that have like roots in Quebec, and that just shows sovereignty is barely matching the PQ score. It will be one of the issues of the election. The CAQ and the Liberals, especially, a bit the Conservatives as well. We'll talk about this. Most Quebecers do not want a referendum, are not interested in this right now, and yet it was a promise of the PQ, and M. Plamondon was offered many opportunities to, as we say in French, walk back on the paint, right? To walk it back, and he has not vigorously. So obviously we're going to hear about it, and it's going to become, we think, a major issue. But what do you think about these numbers, AJ?
Yeah, the PQ's trying not to put it front and center, right? Because a lot of the advertising and the attacks they've had is about the CQ government, right? Do you want more CQ government? That Fréchette is just to use paint again, a new coat of paint on the old kind of dilapidated shed. So they're aware of this. But Saint Pierre Plamondon is not the type to kind of back down. So if he's asked about it, he's going to say, "Of course, that's what we want to do," and all this kind of stuff. But the PQ is not banking on running a campaign on independence. But you could end up with the odd scenario with the PQ winning a majority government, 32% of the vote, with, in their view, a mandate to hold a referendum that is going to fail, right? So it will become, I think, a campaign issue, even if the PQ tries not to. But you do wonder as well, right? There is a fatigue from Quebecers on this issue, but also just the issue about talking about it, right? Like you could also kind of get a backlash if the Liberals go too hard in it. That you could have people being like, "Oh, why? Like, let's talk about other things, like this, whatever." Yeah. So there is it's a two-edged sword a little bit, but there's like the PQ doesn't get any bonus from this at all. If they run on. Like Levesque used to did in '81, just un bon gouvernement, like just run a good government. That would have some success, I think, because Quebecers are not really all that keen on anybody, really. But yeah, it's just going to be such a weird campaign, and the fact that we have 5 parties, that are viable, that will win seats, almost certainly, like that does not happen often. Once in a while, like I think we've talked about this before, that there's very few elections where you've had 5 parties winning seats.
I mean, 76 in Quebec.
Yeah, maybe. And
when was the I was not alive. I mean,
Yeah.
that's my lifetime, right?
There's a BC election in the early 90s where there's a couple of parties that won seats. But usually those fourth and fifth parties, if they win any, it's like 1, 3. It's like the leader gets elected. But here you could have a dozen seats, maybe even 20, that go to these two small parties. So it just even reduces the ability for a majority. It just... Like you run it through a model, the PQ can win a majority on these kinds of numbers, but it's hard to see how that actually happens. I think with these kinds of numbers, voters tend to sort themselves out sometimes.
There could be a very historic case of strategic voting here. We'll see. But to your
a first
point,
past
Eric,
the post moment.
Oh my God. Okay, what is going to be
Reference the
the
Discord.
lowest share of the vote for a winner? Right now, I have the strangest one. Go see it. It's very interesting. And it's in Mégantic. So that's at the edge of the townships. It's just next to the U.S. border. Mégantic. Right now, I think, it's the Parti Québécois is in the lead with 24%. And there was a local poll done there, commissioned by a party that was not published. And it was basically it. Québec Solidaire is not competitive. All four of the parties had between 18 and 22% of support. And so, it's going to be a first past the post. But to your point, Eric, and I want to just, before we move off Quebec, I want to say this. So, Léger asked, among these issues, which is the one that will influence most your vote? And then you have a long list of issues, the usual suspects that we see federally in other provinces. And voters and respondents could also pick multiple ones of them. So, healthcare, 48%. Cost of living, 42%. Housing, 28%. Economy and jobs, 23%. And then, gestion des finances publiques, I guess that would be like the deficit and stuff. 18%. Education, 18%. So you hear me? And then you go, immigration, 12%. Environment, 11%. Holding a referendum on Quebec sovereignty, 8%. And that includes multiple, respondents having multiple answers. It is not a priority for most voters. And so it's a double-edged sword. The Liberals and the CEQ cannot go too hard on this, but they have to point it out. It's a weakness for the Parti Québécois to make that promise. Their voters, their base of voters, it's like catnip. It's like red meat for them, but it's not a winning issue for them. And so... I don't know. I think we're going to have... I hope it's not boring. It could be boring, but it could also be one for the ages, this election, because we do not know what's going to happen.
All right, let's move on to Ontario.
Let's move on to Ontario. Ooh, always the best.
Very excited to talk about Ontario. But actually, here there is something interesting because, we have the liaison poll that had the Liberals up by, I think it was 3 points or 5 points in the last one, whatever it was. And lots of coverage of that. The fact that Ford's approval ratings were like in the 20s, his disapproval in the 70s. And then once again, as I said last time, I said, what's going to happen? And Abacus is probably going to come out with the PCs leading. That happened. And then also Pallistatic poll came out, which is interesting because it's IVR in the same way that the liaison is. And also had the PCs leading by 8. So Pallas had 37, 29 for the Liberals, 26 for the NDP, 37 for the PCs. Abacus had 40 for the PCs, 32 for the Liberals, 21 for the NDP. So an 8-point lead in both of these polls. So I feel a bit validated with my skepticism in the last time we chatted about this.
You did say it. And so basically right now, Liaison is on its own with seeing the Liberals in the lead, the leaderless Liberals, should we say still. The PCs, they benefit here from a split vote like they did in the elections that they won since 2018. But strong NDP numbers. We hadn't seen that in a while. 21 from Abacus, 26 from Pallas Data, and we know there are provincial by-elections that will occur. I'm sure I should know this.
September 3rd.
September 3rd. Yeah, I knew it was soon. Okay.
In Hamilton East, Stony Creek, in Scarborough Southwest, and in York Simcoe.
I don't know. So if the NDP is now in the middle 20s province-wide, I'm looking forward to see these results to see where the NDP is at, because we thought for a minute there that the Ontario Liberals had kind of left the NDP in the dust and we're solely in second place. Maybe it's closer than we thought. But yeah, so we'll see. Government approval for the Doug Ford, not very good. Abacus at 35% approve, 43% disapprove. I mean, it's still enough to win when you have a split vote. But, it's also close to what the English Street Institute had in its quarterly poll in the low 30s. So, yeah, it's tough going for Doug Ford, but the PC brand is strong, man. It's still there.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're weaker than they were. They won the last election, I think, by about like 12 points. Now they're down to 8. And, there's more disapproval than approval. His approval numbers are not nearly as good as they were when he was Captain Canada going up against Donald Trump. But yeah, I don't think the ceiling's fallen down on him just yet, and the floor has fallen out. They still have some decent support. And, I mean, the Liberals at 32 to 29, pretty much where they were in the last election. So I think we can all kind of calm down a little bit of Ontario. I don't know if Doug Ford is going to be forced out just yet by his own party. These numbers are probably good enough. But anyway, Ontario, not always the most exciting when it comes to its elections, but the polling has been a little bit fun lately.
Okay.
I think we'll go to the mailbag.
Yes, let's go.
So what we're going to do this week, we did it a couple of weeks ago, is that we're going to have an extended mailbag segment that is only available for Patreon members. So if you're a Patreon member, you can just keep on listening, and the mailbag's going to roll on. If you're listening this, if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're not a member of the Patreon, we're going to answer one little question in the mailbag because we think it's a fun one, and then we're going to move on to a segment that will not be available. But if you want to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca, you join the Patreon, get access to things like that, the Discord, which seems to have been growing lately, and ad-free early access to the episodes as well. So let's start with the first question we got from one of our Discord members. Go Blue Jays.
Go Blue Jays. So, Eric, what are the odds on when the next federal election, if you have to give percentages, from 2026 to 2029, each year has to total together 100%. Mm-hmm. So what are the odds of election in 26, 27, 28, 29? And I guess technically it could be 2030, but So what do you think, Eric? Are we getting an election soon or a later one? Have you changed
Well, let's see if we can
this?
do a consensus on this. I think it would be 0 for 2026.
Oh, it's never 0.
Oh, okay. 1.
I would say 1. I would go for 1% in 26. Hey, if the Liberals lose all their by-elections, we don't have a majority anymore, and suddenly the Conservatives feel emboldened. They win by 40 points in Brantford, and the Conservatives keep Chicoutimi-Lafière. The Bloc wins Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Liberals in shambles, and then we have an election before Christmas.
Okay.
1%. 1% is fine. Okay.
Okay, 1% for you.
2027. Next year.
Next year, I don't really see an election happening next year. I would put it maybe at 10.
10.
Or maybe 9, so we can get things add it up a bit easier.
Okay, but how
9 or 14, what do you want?
How would an election next year, I mean, talk me through it. If there's an election, a federal election in 2027, how does it happen?
Just because they want to go, I guess.
Just because the Liberals figure, oh man, and they would pay a price if they did that.
Yeah, I think so.
They would pay a price, yeah.
Okay, 4%? Yeah. You want to do 4?
I could do 9, so it adds up to 10. I think 9%. It's a 1 out of 11. Would you take these odds? I would take these odds. 1 to 11? Yeah, I would take these odds for next year.
Okay. So that's 26, 27. All right, 28. 28 starts to get a bit more interesting. It is going to be a U.S. presidential election year.
Absolutely.
Which could be a little bit of a rhetorical kind of device that could be used during a campaign.
Yes.
It's also going to be, at that point, it'll be 2.5 years, 3 years since the last election. Ford did it. And maybe, Ford is whispering little things in Mark Carney's ear. So at that point, I think I could go up to 25.
25%. I was thinking like 40%. I think it's quite. It would be quite likely to. We don't know the future. Obviously, we're just playing around here, people. So this is not entirely serious.
I mean, I know the future, but sure.
But okay, so you would think that right now the U.S. numbers that we see show that the Democrats, even though they have lots of infighting, but that's evergreen. If they do win the midterms and Trump is handcuffed, we know that the many conservatives and many Republicans the Trumpian Republicans, will never concede defeat. They will never say, oh no, we lost, we'll do better next time, we'll talk to voters. No, they will contest everything. And it's going to be a state of chaos going into the 2028 primaries. And then, so I think it would be likely that with a new accord between the three countries, the three amigos, Mexico, US, and Canada, I think it could be likely that we go. So I would say 40% for me, with a total of 50% right now. Well, you say 25? You say a bit lower? 1 in 4?
What if we did 35?
Okay. All right.
All right. We'll land on 35. So that would leave 55% as the odds in 2029. I mean, it's just the natural time.
I think
who
so.
knows what happens in the presidential election anyway? It doesn't mean that things are all great in our relations. And if they have the majority, I can imagine just wanting to hold on to it. Maybe they're still leading in the polls, so they don't worry about an early call. So is that, you feel okay with 55 for 2029? I thought it was going to be higher.
Well, I think I would say I have 50% left, so I would say 49%. So 1 in 2 almost, and I'll keep 1% for 2030 if something big happens. Right. No, are we talking about 29?
Yeah.
Now? Yes, we are. Okay, yeah. And I would keep 1% for 2030 in case something big happens, some revolt or some invasion from U.S. forces. I'm not serious, but
aliens?
That's what I would say. Well, that I would put at 1,000 or 10,000 to 1, but we'll see.
He doesn't believe. Okay, all right. Well, that seems reasonable. So I don't think we need to worry about an election this year. We have the by-elections, and that'll keep us occupied. Okay, so we'll move to the rest of the mailbag for our members. Otherwise, again, go to thenumberspod.ca if you're not a member, if you'd like to listen to the extended mailbag. All right, let's move to the number of the week. Why don't you go first?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be very original here, but I was, eagerly waiting the new Léger poll, considering all the numbers that we've had in July and early August. And the approval numbers are interesting. Now, it's still plus 17. It was plus 22 in June for Léger. So satisfaction and approval, rather, seem to be sliding a bit, but approval, 53 in Atlantic Canada, 54 in Quebec, 54 in Ontario, 50 in the Prairies, 54 in Alberta, and 61 in BC. This is over 50 in every region, and also every gender and every age group, although the 35-41 is 46-46, but still, that's pretty good for a government that has navigated some tough waters. Once we see these numbers, the satisfaction and approval numbers slip, perhaps it'll be a sign that this long honeymoon is over for Carney. It's not just yet.
My number of the week is going to be 13. So I wrote about this on the writ today. So when all the current vacancies and all the current intended vacancies are called with by-elections, we'll have had 13 by-elections since the last general. I looked back through history because it seems like a lot, and it turns out it is actually a lot. When Carney calls that 13th by-election, even if he waits till the last possible day, it will have been the most by-elections called within the first 2 years of a government mandate since Louis Saint Laurent in 1950.
Really?
So it has been over 75 years. So it is unusual, the extent of by-elections we've had. Now, some people might blame Carney for this. Some of them are kind of his own machination. Some of them aren't. Car accident, wanting to run in Quebec provincial politics when you're an opposition politician, people resigning. There's a bit of coincidence there, but it is still a thing. This has been the most by-elections, and it will be the most since the 1950s. Wow. Now, what was happening in the 1950s? If you look at the reasons for by-elections, prior to like the 1970s, MPs died a lot.
It was death. Yeah, there's like justification, resignation, death.
Yeah.
So.
Well, either that or they got a spot on a court bench as a nice little thank you, go away. But yeah, that's kind of remarkable. So anyway, it's going to be a lot of by-elections. We're here for it, and we know that our viewers and our listeners are here for it too, so we're all happy for that. All right, so that'll be it for this week, and as I said, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Apologies again for the lack of episodes this month. We will not do that throughout the fall. Don't worry about that. And if you want to get that extended mailbag and you didn't already because you're not a member of the
was
Patreon,
good.
go to
It
the
was
numbers
really-
pod.ca.
really
Yeah, there
good.
was some really good stuff in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Predictions as well. Whew.
Oh, oof. Yeah, we did. We put some bets down. All right, so that'll be it for this week. Philippe, hope you have a good next 2 weeks. Once again, I will miss you dearly, and we'll chat in a couple weeks.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. Everybody, have a great weekend, and thank you for your support.